everyone, and welcome to this episode of Writers Infusion. I'm your host, Susan. I am here with Dave, Jen, Julie, and Ed. And we are here to critique a women's fiction excerpt titled As Long as We're Together by Rebekah Fraser. So thank you, Rebekah, for submitting. Rebekah's from Connecticut. The summary is a terminally ill man falls for a patient on the psychiatric ward where he works. And I will read the story. So here we go. Here we are, Donnie saying as he pushed the wheelchair into room 52. Which bed would you like, Irene? You're first in, so you get dibs. Of course she didn't answer. He was just trying to make her feel safe. He'd been told his voice was soothing, not like Paul's sultry baritone, but gentle, comforting. Donnie maneuvered the chair alongside the bed near the window, locked the wheels, walked around the chair to see the patient's face. Her right eye was swollen, hair a tangled mess. Bruises covered her face and arms. Can you stand, dear? Irene stared straight ahead, as if she didn't realize Donnie and Paul were in the room. On three, they heaved her out of the chair, dead weight, and settled her onto the mattress. Irene, Paul asked, can we bring anything to make you more comfortable? His deep voice hung in the air. If Irene was in her right mind, she'd be swooning, like girls usually did when Paul was near. Lucky shit. Donnie slid the blanket from the foot of the bed over Irene's small frame. She was all skin and bones. You're safe now, Irene, Donnie whispered. Her eyes sparkled for just a second. Or did they? It could have been the lights flickering. The flickering of the lights in the emergency room had made Irene feel extra jumpy. Now, in this quiet room alone, Irene felt it was happening all over again. Felt she was still sitting on the hard bench in the waiting room with her three beautiful children, rocking herself and Peter. Felt she was watching Tina tell her story for the first time. Tina's mouth, red from the lollipop they'd given her at the registration desk. Face, dirty from the sandbox. The bows Irene had so carefully tied that morning, undone, hanging limply from messy brown pigtails. Squeaky 5-year-old voice repeating the story she told in the car. Petey wouldn't take his teddy bear, Mama. He threw it and screamed, so Daddy gave Peter some medicine. What medicine, sweetheart? Daddy's medicine. What medicine, Irene had wondered, though she knew now, in the quiet room alone. But hearing the story in the car, and again in the waiting room, Irene had been confused. In the hallway, Donnie double-checked his assignments. It had been quiet on the ward lately for some reason, which explained the empty beds in room 52. The professor shuffled by, an unlit pipe in his mouth. He held an open book in front of him as if he was reading. How you doing, Professor? Donnie asked loudly, receiving only a grunt in response. What's the deal with Irene? Paul whispered. She sedated? Paul's training period was over, but Donnie reminded himself his little brother was still new to the job. 6 months on the psychiatric ward was nothing. Donnie looked at Paul, fit from his brief stint in the Navy, a strong, open face that attracted all the girls, dark eyes that revealed his smarts and his fear. Seeing signs of abuse reminded Paul of their sometimes harsh upbringing and made him nervous. Donnie had done what he could to protect his little brother growing up, but he couldn't be there all the time. He'd heard it always got worse for Paul when he went away. Now Paul was the one protecting him, not from abuse, but from... Paul repeated the question, and Donnie realized he had spaced out again. No, she's not sedated. There was a bad scene in the ER and she dissociated. Dissociated, Paul asked. Checked out, you know, like an altered state. Still conscious, but in her mind she's somewhere else. Irene shifted Peter's body so she could see his face. He was still sleeping, his mouth frozen in a dopey grin, eyes half open, creepy. If his body wasn't so warm, Irene might have thought. She shuddered at what she might have thought. Why does he look like that, Mom? Jimmy asked. Irene was afraid to look into her older son's wise blue eyes. Now that he was 12, it was harder to hide things from him. She shook her head. I don't know, sweetheart. Tina continued like a broken record. She told him the story over and over since they got in the car. Peter didn't like the shot, but then he went to sleep. It was a scary kind of sleep, and I told Daddy, but Daddy wasn't listening. Daddy was taking a shot. Irene couldn't stand to hear it. couldn't stand not to hear it, didn't know how to respond. You took care of your baby brother just like a big girl, Tina. You're Mama's good girl. Tina looked into her mother's face, earnest, urgent. I don't know why Daddy likes shots, because nobody else in the whole world likes shots, but he really does, Mama. He really does. He even said, Tina, this medicine makes Daddy feel so good, and he smiled and closed his eyes. Irene, can you open your eyes? His soft voice roused her from the deep sleep into which she had drifted, kind, familiar, musical. Irene, it's supper time. Will you come to the dining room? She opened her eyes a crack. Dark hair, dark eyes, soft features, white uniform. He was kneeling beside her on one knee, steadying himself with his hands. His fingertips were pudgy, like little clubs. His face was close, handsome, warm, open. Are you hungry? A quiet moan was all she could manage. Peter? I'll bring something to your room, all right? You like fish or steak? She nodded. Steak? His shoes squeaked as he walked away. Irene looked at the white linoleum, white walls, white blanket covering her body. She fingered the hospital bracelet on her wrist, heard the social worker's voice in her head. Tina and Timmy are good kids. We'll make sure they go to good homes. What? What? We'll keep them together if possible. But I just went next door. I was just having coffee with my neighbor. There are many responsible families in our foster care system who will... Responsible? Jimmy was in the backyard playing with the neighbor's son. Tina and Peter were home with their father. They're not safe in your home, and it looks like you're not safe in your home either, are you? Irene sat up and tried to shake the memory out of her head. She imagined Peter's chubby little face, laughing, his fat fingers holding crayons, Peter learning to walk, climbing onto the couch, bouncing to music, Peter giving her slobbery baby kisses, Peter, happy, a normal boy, a sweet, normal, healthy 18-month-old, her baby, playing in the sandbox with the big kids, swinging with Tina at the playground, riding on his big brother's shoulders, giggling, happy, normal. Tina calling, Mama, fear in her voice, Peter limp in his big sister's arms. What happened, Peter? What happened? Daddy gave Peter his medicine and he fell over. What medicine? No time to listen, scooping them both into her arms with a strength Irene didn't know she had, running to the car, screaming for Jimmy to come, to hurry, to get in the car. Jimmy panting, asking what happened, driving to the hospital. Peter? Mama's here, baby, Mama's here. Everything's okay, Peter, you're okay, sweetheart. But he wasn't. I never should have left him. Now her chest was caving in, shoulders rounding, breath leaving. It was like she was sitting on the emergency room bed again, holding Tina in one arm and Jimmy in the other, feeling the emptiness on her lap where Peter had been sitting before they took him away for tests. It was like the doctor was standing in front of her again, saying words she couldn't recognize. The problem is your 18-month-old just OD'd on heroin. Heroin? Which caused something called hypoxia. How would he get heroin? Hypoxia, oh no, did I? Yes. Hypoxia starved his brain of oxygen and the brain damage is permanent. That's not possible, doctor. There's nothing we can do. His father just gave him some medicine to make him stop crying, right, Tina? Tina piped up. Daddy gave him some of his medicine, and he said, this medicine makes Daddy feel so good, Tina. And he smiled, and the doctor cleared his throat and looked pointedly at Irene. She was dumbstruck. That medicine, Tina's talking about heroin. Michael's using drugs? Where's he getting them? My husband's using drugs. He gave drugs to our baby to keep him quiet. Oh, God. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Patel. We're going to make sure Peter is stabilized, and then he's going to an institution for the mentally retarded. Oh, God.
Oh, God is right.
Yeah,
we're all parents
right?
here. This hits us right to the core. And I wonder,
Heroin.
Has Irene an inkling that Michael's using? Does she have any idea?
Yeah,
Wouldn't she
know?
sense something, that he's off, that he's out of it some of the time? That I don't know, that money is disappearing. I wondered that. And why are they taking the children away from her? I understand she's dissociated now, but I thought that might be temporary. I know the story takes place in a hospital and someone falls in love with a patient, so maybe she does stay long term. But she was next door having coffee, and she does have a 12-year-old who's in the yard. And why is it that they're putting these kids in foster care, not with an aunt, not with a grandmother, some close relative? I was disturbed about that.
Well,
Again,
I
it's
didn't know
maternal.
if them putting her into the hospital room is happening on the same day as they take the children away from her, because they're saying her face is bruised.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming when
Something's
she went to
happened.
the ER, she was already bruised. So
Right.
he's also abusing her physically.
Yes, I would assume.
Right. So the time shift. I just want to say that I love this first of all. But the time was kind of, I was confused about when she went to the with Donnie in the hospital between the time she was in the ER.
That's true, because it is the same day.
Is it? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, he said that she had a bad experience in the ER.
In the ER, yeah. So she went so she kind of snapped in the ER and then
Right.
they brought her here.
Well, I think maybe it needs to sound a lot more temporary. It just seemed, maybe this is how it works, but it seems so abrupt when they said we're taking your kids and they'll be safe.
Yes.
And maybe it should be more of a, we're taking them to keep them safe until you're ready to come out. But it almost sounds like they're blaming her, because right now,
that's how I read it.
Yeah.
well, look at if you look at the health worker, maybe they're seeing it as, here's this woman, and she's come in, she's obviously being abused. They're probably assuming that it's happened before. And if she's getting abused and she's still thinking it's okay to leave her kids alone with her husband, maybe they don't feel like the kids can be safe there.
Yeah, maybe that needs to be. Yeah, I was wondering the same thing, like why would they take
Right.
them away from her?
So maybe all that is being thought out.
Yeah.
But I think we need to know that rather than just assume it.
I do want to commend the way Rebekah is telling this story, though. Just the shift in the point of views is flawless. Like, I was very clear where I was, who was thinking, whose point of view I was in. But also, like, this is a hugely emotional, tragic scene, and it wasn't melodramatic at all. I mean, it was more like, oh God, like, what do you mean, heroin? And it wasn't like over the top. You know what I mean? Like, I was very moved by the whole scene.
Yeah.
It definitely elicited an emotional response in me. It wasn't like, oh, crying, no, my baby's. You know what I mean? You could do that and make it totally melodramatic and have it be very fake. But this wasn't. This was very kind of quiet, but shocking.
Yes, so
and I
shocking.
thought she did that really well.
Yeah, I thought the structure was perfect. The way that it kind of goes back and forth, narrowing on this
Event,
this terrible event.
Yeah.
And
It kind of starts
yeah,
out
I
here.
agree that
and
her
kinda-
use of dialogue instead of description in the scene, I think, is what makes the difference. She doesn't describe what they look like. She doesn't say she's crying. She doesn't say she was wringing her hands. It's like it's all in the voices.
Yeah, because the way Tina, like the 5-year-old, is, Mommy, he gave him the medicine. Like, she has no idea. Like, so innocent, and she's telling it so happily. He wouldn't give him the teddy bear. So Daddy likes the medicine.
Yeah.
Like, I can see that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she has no. There was one thing that Tina said.
The child's take. Nobody likes shots. Daddy likes shots. Who likes
Daddy
shots?
says it makes him
Right,
feel
I
so
know.
good, and
That was good.
like she had, it was very authentic. There was only one thing that Tina said that I thought didn't sound like a 5-year-old on page 3, where, she's describing it, and she says, Petey didn't like the shot, but then he went to sleep. It was a scary kind of sleep. I didn't know that.
That she would
kinda-
even know that.
Yes.
Yeah, 5.
Right.
That didn't sound like a 5-year-old, but otherwise everything else, like Tina, I thought was
So now
fantastically drawn.
I think that she did a really good job with the whole story. But I have to say, even after a few pages, I still wasn't totally drawn into the main character. I'm not sure. I almost felt like underlying, like when we're saying why are they taking the kids away from her. So I'm kind of seeing it from the point of view of she didn't know her husband was doing heroin. She left her kids next door. I just felt like she must have known something was going on, and she wasn't protecting her kids enough. And maybe she really didn't, but because that's going on in my head, I can't quite empathize with her. I don't feel it. I don't feel that yet.
This did happen.
Can I disagree with
With
everyone?
me?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
What a surprise. Carry on.
That's your job.
Let's look at the summary of the story.
Yes.
The summary of the story is, a terminally ill man falls for a patient on the site. This is not the story. This is the horrible tragedy that put her there.
Right.
But we're arguing about something that is very significant, but it's a minimal part of the book, or the
good point.
whatever. if this story were told in a linear fashion and we were able to follow, trace the tragedy until she's in the hospital and her kids are being taken away, I think it would be far more powerful and much shorter. We'd understand her discomfort, her amazement. We'd watch her crash, which is really what we're looking at in the story. She goes from being mom of a couple of kids and a husband and a normal life to someone who's dissociative. She's separated herself from society. That's the story. And what we're talking about here is why she didn't see her husband taking drugs. It's terrible, but it goes on all the time. If we were to watch the kids in the backyard and see the creepola husband shooting the kid up,
Yeah. Oh.
now we have a story. That would how about that for an opening scene? The husband took the needle, and in order to shut the kid up, gave him a shot of heroin. We're both going to feel great in a minute, kid. And he nods off, and the kid dies or becomes terminally brain damaged. Then mom loses it. In 3 pages, we're in the ward,
Throes of it.
watching her now suffering. I don't care about Donnie. Is Donnie the guy who falls in love with her?
I
must
think
be.
so.
Donnie or
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't.
It must be done.
But they were just like, take a couple of these and you'll feel better in the morning. Separating the mom is dissociated enough, and that's the writer's skill to bring out the fact that her kids are being taken away. How do we feel her pain?
And if, sorry.
Go ahead.
And then if you want to add to the way you're, changing the story a bit, then instead of the terminally ill man falling for the patient, she could be falling for him instead, and that just makes the tragedy even worse.
Neither Donnie nor the other guy are terminally ill, right?
We don't know.
we don't
I
know
wondered
yet,
that.
yeah.
Well,
Totally,
he trails off somewhere where he says, now Paul, I
that's
protected
right.
Paul,
Yeah,
and now
he's
Paul's
protecting
protecting
me.
me from, but she never
yes.
says what
And
it
that's
is.
one thing that drove me crazy.
Yeah.
There were so many take us to the ledge and not jump off sentences. There were a couple of,
Such as?
for instance.
Well, that was one.
Here, let
That
me
was one,
shuffle
yeah.
through the pages for a minute. Okay, Irene felt it. Don't say felt it. What is it that she felt? She goes on in depth in the following paragraph, but don't say it. That's a high school trick.
Right.
Okay. Now Paul was the one protecting him, not from abuse, but from
Dash.
Right.
M dash. That's right. I don't know how to still don't know how to do
That's
that.
right, I fixed it. That's
Why,
right.
why
Because,
not tell it if it's important enough?
Yeah.
That's the place to put it.
That's like a plot device. I don't like that. Just
I-
say
I-
it. It's not.
okay.
It's only creating aggravation. It's not creating
Yeah,
intrigue.
yeah, you're right. It doesn't draw you in. The other one, this is on page 4 of 7. If his body weren't so warm, Irene might have thought, ... She shuddered at what she might have thought.
Right.
It's not a clever device. What would she think?
That he was dead.
Yeah.
He's dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I assume
Yeah.
that.
There- I can appreciate your enjoying the back and forthness of it, and it's a very difficult thing to do well because, frankly, I get lost. I'm so old school that I need linear.
I got a little lost with it.
This happens, and then this happens, and this leads to this, and now you're understanding the flow. You're in a river, and you're going along with the flow of the story, as opposed to this back and forth and the repetition. How many times?
I crossed off.
Yeah, how many times did we hear the same episode that the author is terrified that the reader's not going to get? I got it the first time.
Yes.
Okay, I
Right.
don't need to hear it. I think 3 or 4 times. How the kid was shot with the kid passed out. We get it. We get it. There's an enormous tragedy there.
Right.
I get it.
Just
The tragedy is one thing. Her reaction to it is the story. That's the story, not the tragedy itself.
And you're right, if it starts where you said it could start, then I would feel empathy for her right away.
But she-
Right.
I think it's a tricky thing
I
because,
disagree.
okay,
Very.
all right, number one, I totally forgot the
Summary.
summary. I was reading this and it's like,
Right.
oh crap, this is awful.
Yeah.
But I totally forgot that the summary
You
is
meant the
about
story was
a
awful, not the
terminally
writing was
ill
awful,
man,
right?
falls in, yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's too long for me. So you're absolutely right about that. This isn't the story. This is the lead-in. So the story is about the terminally ill man, Donnie or Paul, we're not sure, probably Donnie. Okay. So the question comes in. Okay, if you're constructing a story about Donnie, and Donnie's going to fall in love with this broken woman who comes to the psychiatric ward, how do you get her there?
That's the writing skill.
How do you get her
That's the wisdom of the good writer.
But I think this is a good way, because it's introducing Donnie, right? And it's introducing her. And
In the first
and
paragraph.
And in the first paragraph.
Yes.
And they end up in the
Nurturing.
same place. So I don't see this as a bad way to do it.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I even the repetition of Tina telling the story, I just felt like it was Irene's psychosis.
I liked
Yes.
that.
Do you know what I mean?
I
Like
did
I didn't
like
feel
that.
like it was Rebekah trying to, hey guys, remember, Daddy gave her the medicine. I didn't feel like it was the author trying to make sure the reader understand. I felt like it was
wouldn't
Irene's
you do that? Wouldn't you
psychosis.
play this
Go over it and over it and
It's
over
like
again.
yes.
hoping for
Like I
different
didn't
endings.
see
you know?
it. I
I liked
she
that.
May. Well,
but
she
I mean, I
may, but not
edited
in
it
the
a bit.
same terms. All we're getting is a summary of what went on. If she thinks it one time, she talks to a doctor or psychologist about it another time. If she's talking to Donnie or whoever another time, those are ways of introducing it, but without the same repetitive comments. Same,
Well, I think there's, I mean, I like that it comes up more than once, but I still think there's repetition, and I'm still on Dave's team. I still think it would start off better with the kid and the father in the yard and having it happen.
no, don't ever agree with me.
But because I don't feel enough empathy for her, I feel like that would really do it for
Well,
me.
think of the opening
Pulls
scene
it
with the
off. I was
dad in the
very
backyard
emotional.
with a needle.
Oof, I can't.
But right,
I
That-
love
would
her
that grab you?
revelation.
No.
And then mom comes out and,
That
oh
would.
my God.
I love
But don't
her
you think-
revelation that she's like, what do you mean medicine? Like, she's thinking it's like Tylenol.
Right,
You know what I
right.
mean? Like, her revelation that, wait a minute, what?
yeah, but
Wait,
you
it
know,
was
I don't
what?
know.
It
If
was a
she,
It was what? Like,
if she's
her
coming,
revelation was, I
don't
thought,
know. She's coming in and
fabulous.
she's been beat up, right? No, maybe that's the first time she's ever gotten beat up. I find it
Probably
very
not.
hard to
She's also
believe.
No.
Very
So
slim.
she's in a
emaciated.
situation. So whether or not she knows her husband's doing drugs, he's doing something. He's probably
Yeah.
been hitting her. So I
Yeah.
feel like she hasn't been protecting her kids enough. I don't see
Yeah.
that. So when I get into this scene, I don't know what I think about her. That's just how I feel when I read this. And if it started off a little bit differently, then I'd feel more along
If
with
I could
her.
get back to the repetition, she has an interesting device. For example, on page 1, where she ends with, or did they? It could have been the lights flickering, and then she has a set of symbols to segue the flickering of the lights in the emergency room.
Right.
So we flow from
She
one
does
scene
connect.
to another with
Yeah.
some sort
Yeah,
of transition
yeah.
that's relative but not exact. Interesting. Speaking of related, I would like to see, or the reader ought to see, more of the fraternal relationship between Donnie and Paul. I need to have interaction between them, conversation to see how they care about each other, how close they are, that one cared for the other. It seems that it's switched. And I don't know if that is the terminally ill man, one of those men, or someone else. And why is he spending the end of his life in a hospital caring for others? And how long does he have to live? I'm very
we don't know,
curious.
yeah,
I'm
we
very
won't
curious.
any
I
of
know, I'm
that.
just asking, throwing
But
it out there.
if we're talking about setting, I think we should know that Donnie and Paul are brothers right away.
Yes.
It would kind of change the dynamic for me. I don't know that at the beginning. And in the first couple of paragraphs, I don't know Paul was there until the third paragraph. And for
Yes.
some reason,
Right.
even that, I know it's just a tiny bit on the page, but it threw me off.
Yes.
Because he was talking as if he wasn't there, but he
Yes.
was there. So it's an easy fix.
You know, I mean, if you look at my pages, I usually mark things up so much, and I think I had
We
like
count on it.
6 comments on this. I
Wow.
think
That's good, yeah.
Wow.
You
I
know,
liked
she's
it a
just
lot.
so good at.
Yeah. I had to reach to
handling
find
language.
anything.
The one thing I would draw attention to for the viewers at home is sometimes in her if clauses, she's not using the subjunctive, which of course you want to do.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
That
Things
goes without
like,
saying.
if Irene,
It's all the rage in
if
Paris.
Irene was in her right
Yes.
mind, it should be if Irene were in her right mind, and then instead of she'd be swooning, she'd have been swooning. I mean, it's such a minor thing, but hey.
No, but it's
grasping at
proper
straws.
language. Nice.
Do you think that conversation with the doctor is exactly how it went down? Because I thought it was awful.
Yeah,
like
they wouldn't-
why would he go right to an like? I was wondering
Yes.
like why they wouldn't call him mentally retarded.
That's right.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
I
And
thought that
B,
They wouldn't use
that
why
term.
wouldn't it
Yeah.
be like rehab? Like they're gonna try to rehabilitate this child somehow. It's not just like write him off.
Just give up.
That never happens. And then, like, why aren't they giving her the option to take him home? But I mean, we realize later that the children are being taken away. But
And the doctor says the problem is, I would
It's a
say,
very harsh
so sorry,
segment.
Mrs.
It is
Patel,
very harsh.
your son, your 18-month-old. But the problem is, sounds
Maybe it would depend on the doctor. You would hope a doctor wouldn't be
Distant.
like that, but I've met all
It
kinds of
depends on-
doctors. I guess it
Yeah, he had a
depends.
golf date. He had to get going. you know.
Now the title interested me, caught my eye. As long as we're together, I don't know who the we are, and I'm very
Well,
curious.
it's
Don't you tell
probably
me.
Donnie and,
It probably is.
and
It probably is.
Irene.
Terminally
But I
ill.
would think the family close together. She and her kids are close together. I don't know.
I gotta say, I gotta give her
Maybe.
props
Maybe it
for, for dealing with situations like this.
Horrible.
Yes.
Well,
Oh,
it's-
I hope there's
I
nothing
don't come within
personal.
a
Yes.
mile
Yes.
of
Makes me
something
uncomfortable just to
this
think about it.
real
Yes.
and this, horrifying, which,
tragic.
happens in real
yeah,
life.
sure it does.
So, props to her for even tackling
But
something like this.
I don't know how she wouldn't know that her husband was, on heroin.
Right.
It's
I
not
know.
like,
I
I
think
don't
he'd
know.
be in
I'm
altered
just not,
states.
I mean, I don't know about heroin, but everything that I've seen on TV, like when you're high on heroin, you're high. It's not
Right.
like cocaine where you're just
Yes.
jumpy and up and awake, and
Right.
people might just think you're hyper.
Does he wear long sleeves to bed? I mean,
Yeah, I know, like
Right.
the tracks, like
She's
she's
got
how
a
does she not
12-year-old.
know?
Even if she had her 12-year-old when she was 15, she's 27 now. So she's
She's not a kid.
Right, she's not a kid.
Right, but and he's doing it right in front of the kids, so the kids wouldn't have said something to her
Before
by now
that.
about the
Right.
needles.
Daddy's medicine.
Daddy has
Yeah, that
medicine.
just seemed off, like that she wouldn't know. I think
Right.
maybe she change it that she does know, but like, oh my God, like he gave it to the baby.
Right. No
You
matter
know
what,
I mean?
that's a shocker.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Regardless of whether she knew he was on drugs, the fact that he gave it to the baby is
I think that would make it more realistic.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, you can still do that. It's still a
yeah,
shock.
there's one of the rules is pacing, and we have bad news and then worse news and even worse news after that. There has to be something to break this constant negativity, or else for the reader, bad becomes the new normal.
She's getting steak for dinner.
That's hospital steak. Don't you wonder where it comes from?
Yeah.
With Jello.
By the way, we have 2 minutes.
Excellent.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm done.
Well, how would you? how would you
I
lighten it?
love this.
What?
How would you lighten it? Would you have lemon?
It's not my story.
Okay.
What she's got,
Yes.
what she threw at us was Dad's a drug addict. The kid's now damaged beyond control. She's in a mental institution with little hope of quick recovery. She's going to fall in love with a guy who's terminally ill. Oh my God.
Give me
That's
ray
a big
of sunshine.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
I
No.
don't know if you're saying lighten it up, but give the reader a little bit of a breather.
I need some
You
help
need a
here.
sequel
Yeah.
to just
Suicide
kind of
watch.
Well, it's just like
let
in
the
a
reader
thriller.
kind of take
Let her
a
enjoy the
Right.
steak.
take
you
a
know.
yes, breath.
Well, it's like that in a thriller too. You can't be running 24/7.
Exactly.
There has to be
There has
a
to be
breather.
Yeah, it's pacing, and
Right.
I'm sure she'd see that later on, or maybe we'd see it later on in the story.
Right.
Given 7 pages, we're not getting a big bite of this.
Yeah.
So,
I definitely would have kept reading.
I would have kept reading.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I liked the way she chose to tell it.
I did mark it up though. I made.
Yeah, I mean, we can always find
notes.
something.
Yeah.
I can,
So-
But I was reaching. I really, I thought it was very compelling.
okay.
Okay.
After we shut down, I have a question.
Okay, so I should end the
Off
show
camera.
first.
Off camera.
Sorry,
I have a
we're not going
question.
to tell.
Dot, dot.
It's a
Alright.
really bad plot device to do that, by the way, but we're going to keep you hanging.
I wonder their ages. I need to know their ages.
Yeah.
Donnie
tell
and
us.
Paul,
That was
a comment
Irene,
I
he
made.
calls her
Oh,
dear.
yeah.
Is he
Adults.
older than
The
she?
adults, right.
The adults. I want their ages.
Adults.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, on that note, Rebekah, thank you so much for submitting. We
Yes.
enjoyed your story. We hope
Lots
our
to talk
comments
about,
helped.
yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Really, lots to talk about. And thank you, everyone else, for joining us on this episode of Writers Infusion. We will see you next time. Keep writing.